Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. All things Middle-earth here with a video talking about how you can best counter this monstrosity of commander. This is Sunind. She is, I think, probably undisputed the best commander in the game. There could be some arguments there, but for the most part, she is a beast. If you have hit her on the field, you know that it hurts. I want to talk through some commanders, some gear, and some skills that can help you in your quest to not get quite as destroyed by this what many would consider a broken character. So stay tuned. We're going to talk through that in just 1 second. Now jumping in, I want to talk about Sunind for just a second before we get into the actual tips here. I just want to say, first of all, every Sunind and every account is going to be a little bit different. There are very, very standard builds that rely on running 2 types of evil men, and Arbalist, the Morgul Arbalist, they have their damage very boosted by running the 2 evil men types. As you can see here, orcs deal extra damage for each evil men ally present. So if you run 2 evil men types with the Arbalist, they're getting 60% extra damage. They also get a army attack from this here. Then she has inspiration, which is the first 3 rounds. She has extra damage dealt modified by her focus stat. That is really the bread and butter of what makes her great. But depending on the respect, depending on the gear, some of these things may or may not be effective. But for the most part, if you implement them, if you're not doing any of them and you implement them where you can, you are going to see much better success against Sunind. Now, first, let's talk about hard counters. The only legitimate hard counter, in my opinion, to Sunind without starting to build your commanders specifically to counter range, just commanders as we usually see them, is Witch King. Witch King is the biggest glass cannon in the entire game. And for the most part, if it's Witch King versus Sunind, Witch King is going to win. Now, if you have your Sunind with a burn chest like this one, Witch King is going to struggle more. He can get it done, but be aware if they are running these, which a lot of people do, because you get hit by a Witch King. Again, there's a reason I have one on mine right now. It's because I hit a Witch King. I was like, crap, I had lost or didn't win as well as I thought I should have. So I pull off something like a gold piece that I do have to get additional burn protection. But in terms of the standard counter, if it's a standard Sunind being run and you have a standard Witch King being run, Witch King will usually take the cake. Also, before jumping into the tips, I want to mention a couple commanders who really do not do well against Sunind. I want to try and save you some troops if possible. So a couple commanders that come to mind right away for me are Gilgal. Gilgal's kit is all based around the Kingly Kin, which has to do with getting avoidance, and the most common accessory used on Sunind is the Wizard's Fireworks with Pursuit. So it negates this whole effect here. And for the most part, Gills are going to struggle. Now, very high respect Gills. They do have a skill that can help with what we're going to talk about in a second, but if you got again, we're talking pretty standard Gil, standard Sunind. Sunind is going to do a very good job. So if you've got a Gil, maybe try and steer clear of these Suninds. Another commander or commanders you should try to avoid are commanders that utilize a Retaliate weapon. So I have my Balin here, who uses the Retaliate hammer. There are a few other commanders who can run Retaliate type of builds. Now, if you read here, it says that when hit by enemies' normal attacks within range, perform a counterattack, which deals 50% damage. This is at least mine at refinement. However, the normal attack damage is reduced by 70. So the big thing here is normal attacks within range. So Balin is very, very hard countered by range commanders, and if you hit the Sunind, it is ugly. So the Balins or any other Retaliate types of builds that you might be running are definitely no-goes for Sunind. Now, hopefully it goes without saying, any non-well-built commanders, just random commanders thrown out there that aren't really a part of the meta, are going to get beat as well. But I wanted to reference a couple that are still very, very good commanders, but don't see a lot of success against Sunind specifically. Now I want to talk about 2 troop types that can do very, very well against Sunind. So any commanders that can utilize these troops effectively. Now, I'm not saying you can just throw these troops in a full stack on any commander and have success, but troops and commanders that can be utilized together well will work with these troops. The first one is going to be the Dunedain. The Dunedain have skills that allow them to deal extra damage to range units and prioritize them. The first one here being Bullseye. It says against ranged enemy targets, damage plus 3%, prioritizing ranged targets. So that maxes out at 30% extra damage to ranged targets to the Arbalist, and it prioritizes them. So if you take out the Arbalist, Sunind is basically done. So this ability right here is crazy good to help take her out. The next one, Gracefulness, also complements well. It is a negative 30% damage received from range units. So if you are getting hit from the Arbalist, they're dealing a little bit less, which definitely will help you get your own damage out and get them taken care of. Another great option is the Reaper. The Reapers have an ability here called Execution, which at round 5 and onwards, they deal an extra 70% damage, which is very, very good. But the big thing here is their culling, which lets normal attacks prioritize enemies with the lowest defense, and very, very typically that is going to be the Arbalist. Now, there are specific Sunind builds that run different, less standard troop comps that allow you to work around this, but for your most standard Suninds, you're going to see probably 9 out of 10 times culling is going to target the Arbalists and take them out. very quickly. Now, one less option here, and it is more of an honorable mention because I don't think the snipers are a fantastic unit, nor do I see them utilized very much on standard commanders in the meta, but they do have a few places they could work if your commander just buffs ranged troops in general. If you're playing non-roleplay, for example, with something like a Faramir, you could probably get something done. But the big thing, again, they have the bullseye ability. So against ranged targets, they deal extra damage, and they prioritize those ranged targets. So if you can find a setup that they fit into, you can definitely get some work done on Sunind. But this would be, again, more of an honorable mention because it's not one I see as much. Now let's talk about gear that can help counter Sunind. Now, gear is one of the areas that you're not going to put a piece on and all of a sudden do a lot better, but with the right troops and the right skills, it definitely can help in your battle. So the first thing I want to point out is items, helmets, specifically the Swan Helm, and we have the Iron Bassinet that have an effect like arrow suppression. Arrow suppression, when maxed out, is going to reduce the enemy ranged units damage by 30%. So I think that goes without saying that them dealing 30% less damage is definitely going to be a helpful thing. If paired with units who are also taking less damage, like the Dunedain, who can take a little bit of less damage, 30% themselves from them, then that means that kind of negates the entire 60% damage boost she gets from her main title. But again, it's not like one helmet is all of a sudden going to, hard counter her. And obviously these are gold pieces that would need serious refinement to start getting good use. Other effects that can be helpful is like the hit lane here with the Bane of Orcs. Again, the idea here is if you're already running a commander who might be running the hit lane, let's say you run a Dwalin and you run a hit lane on him, if you are able to swap to a Bane of Orcs effect, this might help you get out a little bit more damage to not get beat quite as bad, or maybe get a favorable draw with Sunind. But again, one of those things that I wouldn't say, hey, just start running this on everybody. Potentially, if someone's already running it, you have some spare ones so you can shuffle the effects around. Again, that would be something that I would consider doing if I knew what I was hitting. One last effect that could help out a little bit is hazard training. Hazard training for your melee units in the first 2 instances of damage they take, it's going to reduce that by up to 60%. Now, the Arbalists aren't the fastest in the lineup, depending on who you get. Usually, the Dragoons are going to go first if you're running a very standard like Dragoon and Halberdier combination. But it could allow you to take 60% less damage from one of the Arbalist attacks in the first round, which again could be the difference of you having enough of a front line left to last a little bit longer into the battle. So again, not something that's going to hard counter her, but if you have some of these pieces laying around or you have effects you can switch to, using a few of those could definitely help tip the scales towards you not getting wrecked. Now, something else I want to put out is some helmets that could be options. Now, first of all, I don't think any of these are amazing, helmets that are going to all of a sudden turn the tide for you. But for example, if the Sunind is not running a helm that protects against madness, if you have a helmet like the War Helm that has a chance to put out Discord in the first 2 rounds, that could be very, very significant if the Sunind does not have their own Hunter's Guide on that's protecting from this. And in the same vein, if you obviously have a Hunter's Guide or a Cask of the Submerged Owl or whatever it is yourself, protecting from stun or madness could be helpful because some Suninds do use the Hunter's Guide here with Discord. So even running a Horseman's Helm, the purple item that has madness immunity, could definitely help you not attack your own units in the first couple rounds, which again is not a good thing if you're trying to beat Sunind. Now I want to talk about some skills that are very good against Sunind. The first one is going to be the Champion of the Light. It's going to deal increased damage to Orcs, Uruk-hai, and Trolls. Now, obviously, for Frontline's Evil Men, this doesn't affect that, but potentially pair with some troops who are going to focus on the Orcs first. Again, increased damage here with increased damage from some gear potentially and units who their own damage. You start to get a lot going. It can definitely tip the scales in your favor. Commanders like Gandalf the Grey, Gandalf the White, and even Elrond who run this can see some success. Again, if you build things correctly, you got extra damage here. On Elrond, for example, if you have 3 Elven unit types, you could have some extra damage here for the Elves, which could allow you to take them out before they take you out. Now, on the evil side, there are not a ton of good options, I'll be honest. So if you're facing a Sunind and you only have evil commanders, there are a few options, though. Again, I wouldn't suggest running these commanders just to try and counter Sunind, but maybe you already have them and you want to give them a try. There can definitely be some success, again, when built properly with the right troops and the right gear setups. So first of all, Undying has a skill called Nimbleness, which is going to reduce the damage received from enemy range units, so that can be very effective. Another one could be Agzok. Again, not someone, this video is not a, hey, run Agzok and the Undying. It's more of a, if you're running them, you can set them up properly to potentially be counters to Sunind if you don't have anything else. But he does have the Mountain Warrior title, which is going to increase the damage he does to ranged units, as well as Seeker, which is going to increase the damage even more that he does to ranged units. So there definitely is a potential there if you've got an old Agzok on the bench who you've respected up way too much in the first 2 seasons, and it'd be one of those things that might be more of an interesting experience than a like true hard counter. You should definitely get going. But if you happen to have Agzok laying around and and you want to level him up, you could get some success. I'm also going to throw Eomer's unique item here as an honorable mention as a commander. Now, obviously, this is a big investment, and I wouldn't necessarily say just do this just to counter Sunind. But with her being as good as she is, and Eomer being a solid hybrid damage commander, his effect here, like the wind, says they gain the following effects in sequence: increase Eomer's next damage dealt by 10% when speed reaches 200. Allied mounted units prioritize enemy range units when speed reaches 350. So again, prioritizing the ranged units, taking them down, can do very well. Now, I've seen some reports of this, and it looks like a lot of times it's just draws, like you're almost full wiping each other. But if it's against the most meta commander in the game, you got to do what you got to do. So let me know if you've used Eomer and like the unique here, but I've definitely seen some success as opposed to without it, where he would just get wrecked. But that's pretty much going to do it for our video today. Again, none of these things by themselves are going to be a quick hard counter to Sunind. And like I said in the beginning, every Sunind can be built a little bit differently, have different gear, do different things. So I don't want to hear in the comments someone's like, oh my gosh, like I tried this piece and it didn't work. These are all like collective tips that I think if used together in situations where you'd get beat very badly, you could at least get a somewhat favorable draw. Again, with the right commanders, you can definitely beat Sunind very, very well. But the idea here is to scout with pathing commanders if possible, identify where the Sunind is, what gear she has on, and then potentially move things around so you don't run into a Sunind with a commander who's just going to get wrecked without dealing any damage at all. But let me know down below what you think of Sunind and these tips, and what tips do you have for those who are trying to counter Sunind themselves. Again, we might do a video more in depth once we're back in season. We're currently lounging in the luxurious bag end, so I'd love to actually get back into a season and try out some more of these things and show you guys. But for the most part, these tips will definitely help. They're not going to hurt your experience. But again, I want to make sure it's clear that the intent is not to just put one piece of gear on and all of a sudden you hard counter Sunind. She is very, very good and will not be beaten easily. But if you utilize a lot of these things and play smart, you can definitely do better than you would otherwise. But that's going to do it from this one. Let me know what you guys think down below. And as always, I'll see you in a future video.